21. The Gaslighting Legacy. Psychological horror thriller. 20,000-word outline. The story begins with Eleanor Whitmore reluctantly returning to her childhood home, the imposing Whitmore estate, after receiving news of her grandmother's sudden passing. The moment she crosses the threshold of the decaying Victorian mansion, an unsettling feeling takes root. Her family welcomes her with rehearsed warmth, their hugs just a second too long, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. They insist she's always been cherished, but the physical evidence contradicts their claims. Her childhood bedroom has been repurposed as a guest room. Her name is conspicuously absent from family portraits after age 8. And when she mentions specific memories, her relatives exchange furtive glances before dismissing them as false memories. As Eleanor settles into the oppressive atmosphere of the house, her nightmares intensify, vivid, terrifying visions of being trapped in the attic, her small fists pounding against the locked door as someone whispers her name from the other side. During daylight hours, she begins a clandestine investigation of the estate, uncovering disturbing inconsistencies. Medical records showing treatment for injuries no one will discuss, school reports under a slightly different name, and a locked filing cabinet containing legal documents about a guardianship arrangement. The more evidence she finds, the more aggressively her family pushes back. Her laptop mysteriously crashes, her discovered documents go missing, and her mother begins leaving sedatives by her bedside to help her sleep. The psychological tension reaches its peak when Eleanor discovers a hidden compartment in the library containing a birth certificate for Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, born the same day as her, to the same parents, but with one crucial difference. This Eleanor died at age 7. The horrific truth emerges through a series of fragmented clues: newspaper clippings about a tragic accident, a life insurance policy payout, and finally, a confession letter from her aunt, revealing that after the real Eleanor's death, her grief-stricken parents secretly adopted a look-alike orphan to replace her, our protagonist. The story culminates in a shattering confrontation where Eleanor must decide whether to maintain the charade or expose the terrible truth, knowing it could destroy the only family she's ever known. The Replacement Child. Psychological drama. 20,000-word outline. Clara Bennett's life has always existed in the shadow of her perfect older sister Sophie, who drowned at age 8 in what was ruled a tragic accident. When Clara returns to her childhood home to help her aging parents downsize, she stumbles upon a hidden storage room containing Sophie's preserved belongings. Not just mementos, but an entire shrine maintained with disturbing devotion. The room contains every artifact of Sophie's short life: her school uniforms still on tiny hangers, her half-used art supplies, even the beret she was wearing the day she died. But what truly chills Clara is discovering her own baby book interleaved with Sophie's, with notes comparing their developmental milestones in her mother's precise handwriting. As Clara investigates further, she uncovers a pattern of eerie similarities between her life and Sophie's. Same schools, same extracurricular activities, even the same friends' parents who look at her with uncomfortable recognition. Her parents' behavior takes on new, unsettling dimensions. Her mother still bakes Sophie's favorite cookies on her birthday. Her father keeps a first edition of the book Sophie was reading when she died on his nightstand. When Clara confronts them, their reaction isn't denial, but quiet resignation, as if they've been waiting decades for this moment. The devastating truth emerges through fragments, medical records showing her mother was deemed infertile after Sophie's birth, a suspiciously large withdrawal from her parents' savings right before her conception, and finally, a letter from a disgraced fertility specialist discussing genetic replication techniques. Clara wasn't just born to replace Sophie, she was designed to be Sophie, down to the smallest detail. The story reaches its emotional climax as Clara must reconcile with the knowledge that every choice in her life may have been predetermined by parents desperate to resurrect their lost child. The Locked Room Mystery. psychological thriller, 20,000-word outline. Meera Patel's childhood was marked by one unexplained event: the sudden, middle-of-the-night move when she was 12, with her parents refusing to let her take any belongings or say goodbye to friends. 15 years later, when the new owners of her childhood home contact her about a disturbing discovery, Meera returns to face the past she's tried so hard to forget. The current residents lead her to a secret room concealed behind what was once her bedroom closet, a perfectly preserved child's bedroom from the early 1990s, complete with toys, clothes, and schoolwork belonging to a girl named Anjali Patel. As Meera investigates, she uncovers increasingly disturbing connections between herself and this mysterious Anjali, same birth date, 3 years apart, same hospital, same parents. The local library's archives reveal a brief news item about a tragic drowning accident involving the Patel's toddler daughter 6 months before Meera's birth, though neighbors whisper about unexplained screams heard that night. Meera's parents react with disproportionate panic when confronted, her father threatening legal action if she continues digging, her mother collapsing into hysterics about history repeating itself. The truth comes in fragments: medical records showing her mother was sterilized after Anjali's birth, adoption papers backdated to appear as a natural birth, and finally, a confession from a retired nurse about a black market adoption ring operating in the hospital where Meera was born. The story's climax reveals that Meera isn't just a replacement for a lost child. She's a carefully selected look-alike purchased to help her parents maintain the illusion that their perfect family was never shattered. The final gut-wrenching revelation comes when Meera discovers Anjali's grave and finds it empty. Quacked, The Mother Who Denied Her, psychological thriller, 20,000-word outline. Lena Carter's search for her birth mother began as a simple DNA test curiosity and evolved into an obsession when she tracked down Marjorie Cole, a reclusive woman living in a heavily secured compound. Their first meeting ends violently, with Marjorie screaming denials and threatening Lena with a restraining order. Undeterred, Lena begins surveilling Marjorie's isolated property, documenting the woman's paranoid routines and noticing strange details. The basement windows are barred from the inside. The garden contains a suspiciously child-sized swing set, despite no children living there. And Marjorie receives mysterious monthly deliveries from a medical supply company. Breaking in during one of Marjorie's rare outings, Lena discovers a horror show masquerading as a home, soundproofed rooms, surveillance equipment monitoring every angle of the property, and a locked clinic-style room containing prenatal care equipment and files on dozens of women. The most disturbing find is a wall of newspaper clippings about missing pregnant teens from the 1980s, each marked with cryptic codes. When Marjorie returns unexpectedly, Lena barely escapes, but not before grabbing a file with her own name on. The documents reveal Marjorie wasn't just a nurse at the fertility clinic. She was the mastermind behind an elaborate scheme to steal babies from vulnerable young women, using her medical knowledge to fake stillbirths and sell the infants to wealthy clients. Lena's investigation leads her to other victims, women who were told their babies died and now grown children like herself, who were products of this horrific trade. The story reaches its terrifying climax when Lena realizes Marjorie's denials weren't just about covering up the past. She's still operating the scheme, and Lena's biological mother may be imprisoned in that soundproofed basement. 5. The Foster. System cover-up, psychological thriller, 20,000-word outline. Nina Morales always knew her time in foster care was troubled, but when she requests her records as an adult, she's met with bureaucratic stonewalling and eventually outright threats. When her apartment is ransacked and the few documents she managed to obtain are stolen, Nina realizes she's stumbled onto something far bigger than her own troubled past. Her investigation leads her to a network of former foster children who report similar experiences: missing records, suspicious adoptions, and a pattern of caseworkers who've since disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. Tracking. Down a retired social worker living off-grid, Nina learns about the program, an elaborate scheme where certain foster homes served as way stations for children being funneled into illegal adoptions, human trafficking, and worse. The system was protected by judges, politicians, and law enforcement, with paper trails meticulously erased. Nina's own case file, what little she can reconstruct, shows her biological mother was coerced into signing away her rights while heavily medicated after a suspicious car accident. Vatcher, 26. The Island of Lost Children. A woman's search for her true identity leads her to a remote, fog-shrouded island where forgotten children were once sent, a place erased from maps and official records. The journey begins when she discovers an old letter hidden in her adoptive parents' attic, addressed to a woman she's never heard of, mentioning an island where the lost ones go. The handwriting is frantic, the ink smudged as if written in haste, and the postmark is from a coastal town that no longer exists. Determined to uncover the truth, she follows the trail to a decaying port where fishermen whisper about a cursed place offshore, a place where ships used to take children who didn't belong. The island itself is a relic of a darker time. Its crumbling buildings overgrown with ivy, its streets silent except for the wind. As she explores, she finds remnants of the past, rusted cribs in what was once an orphanage, faded names scratched into walls, and a ledger listing children who were brought there, only to vanish from official records. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes this was no ordinary institution. The children weren't just abandoned, they were intentionally erased, their identities rewritten or sold to new families. Some were victims of political purges, others were stolen from unmarried mothers, and a few were simply unwanted in ways no one would admit. The final revelation comes when she stumbles upon a hidden room beneath the old administration building, its walls lined with filing cabinets. Inside, she finds her own name, not as a child sent away, but as one of the few who escaped. The record suggests she was taken from her birth mother under false pretenses, smuggled off the island before the system could claim her completely. But the most chilling discovery is a list of names at the back of the ledger, children who didn't survive the island's harsh conditions. She was one of the lucky ones. Now she must decide, does she expose the truth, knowing it could destroy the lives of others like her, or does she let the island's secrets stay buried in the mist? 27. The name on the gravestone. A routine visit to her family's ancestral cemetery turns into a nightmare when a woman sees her own name etched into a weathered gravestone, belonging to a child who died decades ago. At first, she assumes it's a coincidence, but the birth date matches hers exactly. Shaken, she digs into local records, only to find that the death certificate lists her parents' names. According to official documents, she should be dead. Her adoptive family insists it's a mistake, but their nervous glances tell her otherwise. Her investigation leads her to a small-town newspaper archive, where she finds a brief obituary for a baby girl who died in a house fire, a fire that, according to reports, left no survivors, yet she's alive. The deeper she searches, the more contradictions she uncovers. Hospital records showing her birth, but no records of the fire victim's burial. A local librarian, hesitant at first, finally confesses that there were rumors back then, rumors of a wealthy couple who lost their child and quietly acquired a replacement. The final clue comes from an elderly neighbor who remembers the fire and the whispers that followed. The couple's real daughter did die that night, but another child, born the same day in a nearby hospital, was taken to fill the void. The woman realizes with horror that she was never adopted. She was stolen. The gravestone isn't a mistake. It's proof of the life she was meant to have. Now, she must confront the people who raised her and demand the truth, even if it means learning that everything she knew was a lie. 28. The Cross-Continental Search. A single birth certificate, found tucked inside an old book, sends a woman on a journey across continents to uncover the truth about her origins. The document lists her birthplace as a small village in a country she's never visited, with parents' names she doesn't recognize. When she confronts her adoptive family, they claim it's a forgery. But the paper feels real, the ink faded with age. Determined to find answers, she travels to the village only to discover it was destroyed in a war. The few survivors remember a child matching her description, a child taken away by foreign aid workers under suspicious circumstances. Her search takes her through refugee records, black market adoption files, and the testimony of a retired nurse who confesses that some children were relocated during the chaos of war, not for their safety, but for profit. The trail leads her to an underground network that falsified documents, sold infants to wealthy foreigners, and erased their true histories. Along the way, she meets others like her, now adults, still searching for their roots. The final breakthrough comes when she tracks down the woman listed as her birth mother on the certificate, only to learn she was a teenage refugee who never gave consent. The adoption was a theft disguised as salvation. Now the woman must decide, does she rebuild a relationship with the family she was stolen from? Or does she return to the life she's always known, forever haunted by what could have been? 29. The Amnesiac's Journey. A woman with no memory of her early childhood retraces her steps to the town where she was found at age 6, alone, malnourished, and unable to recall her own name. The police report says she was discovered, wandering near a bus station, but no missing persons case matched her description. Raised in foster care, she spent years wondering where she came from. Now, as an adult, she returns to the town, hoping something will trigger her lost memories. The locals react strangely to her questions. Some refuse to speak to her. Others glance nervously over their shoulders before shutting the door. An old diner owner finally breaks the silence, telling her about a family that lived on the outskirts of town, a family that disappeared overnight, leaving everything behind. The woman visits the abandoned house and is hit with flashes of memory, a paisumar rocking chair, a lullaby, a man's angry voice. Digging deeper, she learns about a cult that operated in the area decades ago. Children were taken from unworthy parents and given to chosen followers. She wasn't abandoned. She was kidnapped. The final piece of the puzzle comes when she finds a hidden basement in the old house, its walls covered in children's drawings, one of them signed with her name. The truth is worse than she imagined. She escaped that night, but others didn't. Now, she must decide whether to expose the cult's crimes or leave the past buried. 30. The Cryptic Photograph. An old photograph, found in a thrift store album, shows a group of children, one of them unmistakably her as a little girl. The problem? She's never seen the picture before, and the other faces are strangers. The back of the photo bears a faded address and the words, "Remember us." Obsessed, she tracks down the location, a now abandoned boarding school with a dark reputation. Former students whisper about experiments, disappearances, and children who were reassigned to new identities. One survivor, now elderly, recognizes her in the photo and tells her the terrible truth. The school wasn't a school at all. It was a front for a government program that erased unwanted children, giving them new lives, whether they wanted them or not. The final revelation comes when she finds records listing her original name, her real parents, and the reason she was taken. Her birth family was considered undesirable. The photograph was a secret keepsake, a way for the stolen children to remember each other. Now she must decide. Does she reclaim the identity that was stolen from her, or is it too late to go back? Here are the detailed 2,000-word explanations for each of these 5 intriguing outlines. 1. The ghostly mother. This paranormal mystery begins with our protagonist, a woman in her late 20s or early 30s, suddenly experiencing vivid dreams featuring a beautiful stranger who calls her "my child." At first dismissing them as stress-induced fantasies, she becomes increasingly disturbed when the dreams evolve into waking visions, catching glimpses of the woman in mirrors, smelling her distinctive rose perfume in empty rooms, and finding objects mysteriously moved around her apartment. The supernatural encounters intensify until one stormy night, the spirit manifests fully, revealing herself as the woman's biological mother who died shortly after her birth. The ghostly mother begins guiding her daughter through a series of cryptic clues about her true origins: an old locket hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace, a key taped beneath a dresser drawer, and ultimately directions to a long-abandoned house on the outskirts of town. As the protagonist investigates, she uncovers disturbing truths about her adoption. Her birth mother didn't willingly give her up, but was actually murdered by someone who wanted the baby for themselves. The adoptive parents she's loved her entire life may have been complicit in this dark transaction. The story reaches its emotional climax when the spirit reveals she's been trapped between worlds all these years, unable to move on until her daughter learns the truth. In a heart-wrenching confrontation, the protagonist must decide whether to expose the crimes of the people who raised her or protect the only family she's ever known. The resolution comes when she helps her birth mother's spirit find peace by bringing the murderer to justice, finally giving them both the closure they've needed for decades. This bittersweet ending leaves her forever changed, carrying the love of two mothers, one living, one eternal. The Cursed Bloodline. Our protagonist's world shatters when she tracks down her biological family, only to discover they deliberately abandoned her as an infant because of an ancient family curse. The curse, dating back generations, dooms firstborn daughters to either die tragically young or bring death upon those they love. Her ancestors believed abandoning the cursed children would break the cycle, but the protagonist finds evidence suggesting this act of rejection actually perpetuates the curse through generations. As she investigates her family history, she uncovers a pattern of tragic deaths, mysterious accidents, and unexplained suicides plaguing her lineage. The family's ancestral home contains a hidden room filled with portraits of doomed women, each bearing an uncanny resemblance to her. A cryptic family Bible contains handwritten accounts of the curse's manifestations through centuries, with increasingly desperate attempts to circumvent it through banishment, arranged marriages, and even alleged witchcraft. The story's turning point comes when she experiences supernatural phenomena herself, prophetic dreams that come true, objects moving on their own, and an ominous shadow figure that seems to follow her. She must then make an impossible choice: walk away from her bloodline forever and risk the curse passing to any children she might have, or embrace her heritage and attempt to break the centuries-old pattern through some dangerous ritual described in the family's forbidden grimoire. The climax sees her performing this ritual in the family crypt at midnight, facing both metaphorical and literal demons from her ancestry, emerging either cursed or cured as the first light of dawn breaks. The Time Slip Revelation. After a car accident on a rainy night, our protagonist wakes up disoriented in what appears to be the past, specifically the year and location of her birth. At first believing she's suffering from amnesia or brain trauma, she gradually accepts she's somehow been transported back in time when she encounters much younger versions of people she knows, including her adoptive parents before they were married. The most shocking discovery comes when she witnesses her own birth mother, a teenage girl being pressured into giving up her baby by wealthy relatives who deem the pregnancy a scandal. The time slip premise allows for heartbreaking dramatic irony, as the protagonist, unable to reveal her true identity, tries desperately to change events while being perceived as just a strange woman with too many questions. She befriends her young birth mother, seeing herself in the girl's mannerisms and personality traits, and attempts to subtly influence her decision about the adoption. Historical details immerse us in the era, the social stigma against unwed mothers, the lack of reproductive rights, and the shady practices of some adoption agencies at the time. The story's emotional core lies in the protagonist's impossible dilemma. Should she try to prevent her own adoption, knowing it might erase her current life and family, or allow history to unfold as it did? A poignant scene shows her holding herself as a newborn, understanding for the first time how much her birth mother loved her despite giving her up. The resolution comes when she's suddenly pulled back to the present, retaining all these memories, but uncertain whether anything she did actually changed events. The ambiguous ending leaves her, and readers, wondering whether our pasts are truly fixed or if love can transcend even time itself. Fikumor, The Fey Child. This modern fantasy begins with our protagonist experiencing strange occurrences throughout her life she could never explain, an ability to instinctively navigate any forest, an uncanny talent for finding lost objects, and dreams of a glowing realm she wrote off as childhood imagination. Everything changes when a mysterious stranger appears at her door, addressing her by a name she's never heard before and claiming she's not human but a changeling, a fey child swapped at birth. According to this otherworldly visitor, her true family has been searching for her across worlds for decades. As she reluctantly follows clues into increasingly supernatural situations, she discovers hidden abilities, understanding the language of animals, seeing through glamours, and manipulating emotions through song. Flashbacks reveal moments from her childhood that take on new meaning, the imaginary friends who were actually fey messengers, the times she healed unusually fast from injuries, and why she always felt different from her human family. The story's midpoint twist comes when she learns she wasn't just taken randomly, but specifically targeted because of her royal fey bloodline, making her a pawn in an ancient political struggle between the Seelie and Unseelie courts. The climax forces her to choose between two worlds: stay with the human family who raised her but may have known about her true origins all along, or cross over permanently to the fey realm where she's both revered and in terrible danger. This decision is complicated by the revelation that time flows differently there. What might be days in the fey world could be years in the human one. The resolution sees her negotiating a balance between both her natures, becoming a bridge between worlds while never fully belonging to either, in a bittersweet ending about identity and belonging. The Immortal's Daughter. The protagonist's search for her birth mother takes a supernatural turn when she discovers newspaper clippings spanning centuries featuring women who look exactly like her. From an 18th century portrait to a 1920s flapper to a 1960s activist. Her investigation leads her to a secret society that tracks the ageless ones, people who don't age due to a genetic mutation or perhaps something more mystical. She learns her mother is one of these immortals who went into hiding after other immortals began disappearing, hunted by an organization that wants to harvest their longevity. The story blends thriller elements with supernatural romance as the protagonist becomes embroiled in this hidden world, attracting dangerous attention from both the hunters and other immortals who see her as a threat. Flashbacks, either through visions or her mother's memories, reveal she was given up not out of lack of love, but to protect her. Because the children of immortals are even more valuable to the hunters, possessing diluted but still potent longevity, genes that can be extracted through horrific means. The emotional core of the story lies in the reunion between mother and daughter after decades apart, with the immortal mother having lived through multiple identities while secretly watching her daughter grow up from afar. The climax presents an impossible choice: inherit her mother's immortality and the endless cycle of hiding and loss that comes with it, or remain mortal and vulnerable, but able to live an authentic life. The resolution sees the protagonist forging a third path, using her unique position as someone who can move between both worlds to broker an uneasy peace between immortals and hunters, while finally getting to know the extraordinary woman who gave her life centuries ago. 36. The Stolen Birthright. The story begins with our protagonist, a middle-class woman in her 30s, taking a routine DNA test out of curiosity about her heritage. The results come back with a shocking revelation. She shares an extremely high percentage of DNA with one of the wealthiest families in the country, a dynasty whose name is synonymous with power and privilege. At first, she assumes it must be a mistake, but when she digs deeper, the evidence becomes undeniable. Birth records, sealed court documents, and whispers from former family employees all point to one impossible truth. She is the biological child of the family patriarch, born from a secret affair with a maid who was quietly paid off and sent away shortly after giving birth. As she attempts to make contact with her newly discovered relatives, she is met with immediate hostility. The family's lawyers send threatening letters, private investigators follow her, and her social media is flooded with anonymous accusations that she is a fraud. Undeterred, she hires her own legal team and files a lawsuit for recognition, demanding not just financial compensation, but acknowledgement of her true identity. The case becomes a media sensation, with the public torn between seeing her as a gold digger or a wronged woman fighting for justice. The deeper she goes, the darker the family's secrets become. She uncovers evidence that her birth was not just hidden, it was actively covered up, with falsified documents, bribed officials, and even a suspicious fire at the hospital where she was born. The most chilling discovery comes when she learns that the maid who gave birth to her didn't just disappear, she died under mysterious circumstances shortly after signing away her parental rights. The family's current heir, a ruthless cousin who stands to lose everything if she is legitimized, makes it clear that she is playing a dangerous game. The climax of the story comes in the courtroom, where DNA evidence, witness testimonies, and a last-minute confession from a retired family lawyer finally force the truth into the open. But victory is bittersweet. While the judge rules in her favor, granting her legal recognition as a member of the family, she realizes that the wealth and status she has fought for come with a gilded cage of expectations, surveillance, and enemies who will never accept her. The story ends with her standing at the gates of the family estate, holding the court order that proves who she really is, but wondering if the price of her birthright was worth paying. 37. The Political Scandal. A woman in her 40s has always known she was adopted, but when she finally requests her original birth certificate, she is stunned to see the name of a prominent political figure listed as her father, a man who would go on to become a U.S. senator and nearly a presidential nominee. At first, she assumes it must be an error, but when she hires a genealogist to trace her lineage, the truth is undeniable. She is the product of a decades-old affair between the politician and a young staffer, a scandal that would have derailed his career if it had ever come to light. Her investigation reveals that her adoption was not a private family matter, but a carefully orchestrated cover-up involving party operatives, a sympathetic judge, and a well-funded adoption agency that specialized in discreet placements. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes that her existence was treated as a liability to be erased, her birth mother pressured into silence with a generous payout and an NDA. When she tracks down her biological mother, now a retired lobbyist, living under an assumed name, she is met not with joy, but with terror. Her mother warns her to stop asking questions before someone gets hurt. The story takes a dangerous turn when she discovers that her biological father, now an elder statesman, is still being protected by powerful allies who have spent decades ensuring his secrets stay buried. A break-in at her apartment, a car that nearly runs her off the road, and a smear campaign painting her as an unstable conspiracy theorist all make it clear that she is threatening forces far bigger than herself. The turning point comes when a journalist investigating the story is found dead, ruled a suicide despite clear evidence of foul play. The climax unfolds on the eve of a major election, when she must decide whether to go public with her story, knowing it could upend the political landscape, but also that it might destroy what little relationship she has managed to build with her birth mother, who fears retaliation. In the end, she chooses to leak the documents anonymously, sparking a media firestorm that forces the truth into the open. The story closes with her watching the news coverage of her father's resignation, wondering if justice was worth the cost, and if she will ever truly belong to either of the families that have shaped her life. T8. The Blackmail Files. When Sapin Satinanom, a woman begins searching for her birth parents, she expects bureaucratic hurdles, not a home invasion where the only thing stolen is her adoption file. The break-in is too targeted to be random, and when she presses the adoption agency for answers, she is met with stonewalling and veiled threats. Determined to find out why someone wants to keep her from the truth, she tracks down a retired social worker who slips her a key to a storage unit before warning her to be careful who you trust. Inside the storage unit, she finds boxes of files on dozens of adoptees like herself, all from the same agency. The records are damning. Forged signatures, altered birth dates, and coded notes suggesting that many of the adoptions were anything but legal. At the bottom of one box, she finds a ledger listing payments from wealthy clients alongside the names of children, her own included. The realization hits her like a physical blow. She wasn't adopted. She was sold. Her search for answers leads her to a network of powerful people, judges, doctors, and politicians who benefited from this underground adoption ring. The deeper she goes, the clearer it becomes that these records are worth killing. 4. A former nurse who agrees to talk to her dies in a suspicious car accident the next day. A lawyer who handled the adoptions commits suicide, leaving behind a note that reads like a confession or a warning. The story reaches its climax when she confronts the mastermind behind the operation, a charming philanthropist who has spent decades laundering his crimes through charity work. He offers her a choice: take a generous settlement and disappear, or risk exposing not just him, but every family built on these illegal adoptions, including her own. The story ends with her standing in front of a reporter's camera, holding the ledger that proves what was done to her, knowing that the truth will destroy lives, but that silence would make her complicit. 39. The DNA database match. A woman's casual ancestry test turns into a nightmare when she receives an email from law enforcement. Her DNA is a close familial match to evidence from a notorious unsolved crime. At first, she assumes it must be a mistake, but when detectives show up asking about her biological family, she realizes with dawning horror that she may be related to a killer or a victim. Her investigation leads her down a rabbit hole of police records, old news articles, and a cold case file that suggests her adoption was connected to the crime. The victim was a young woman who disappeared shortly after giving birth, a woman who might have been her mother. The prime suspect? A serial killer who was never caught. As she pieces together the timeline, she begins to suspect that she wasn't just adopted. She was rescued from a crime scene, her origins buried to protect her from the truth. The story takes a chilling turn when she tracks down the detective who worked the original case, now retired and unwilling to talk. When she finally corners him, he confesses that her adoption was arranged outside normal channels because the truth was too dangerous. Some secrets, he tells her, are better left dead and buried. But she can't let it go, not when the killer may still be out there. The climax comes when her digging attracts the wrong kind of attention. A break-in at her home, a car tailing her too closely, And finally, a direct threat. A note left on her doorstep with a single word: stop. The story ends with her standing at the grave of the woman who might have been her mother, holding a flower in one hand and a file of evidence in the other, knowing that pursuing the truth could cost her life, but walking away would mean surrendering to the darkness that has haunted her since birth. 40. The Doctor's Secret. A retired obstetrician on his deathbed calls a woman to his side and confesses that he illegally sold newborns to wealthy clients for decades, and that she was one of them. The shock of his admission sends her reeling, but before she can demand answers, he dies, leaving behind only a cryptic note with a case number. Her search for the truth leads her to a defunct maternity clinic with a reputation for discreet services for unwed mothers. The records are gone, the building demolished, but she finds a nurse who worked there, a woman who is terrified to talk, but finally reveals that the doctor's special adoptions were an open secret among staff. The babies weren't given up willingly. Their mothers were told they had died in childbirth, while the infants were sold to couples desperate for a child at any cost. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes how many lives were destroyed by this scheme. She tracks down other victims, adoptees like herself, birth mothers who never stopped grieving, and adoptive parents who had no idea their child was stolen. The most heartbreaking discovery comes when she finds her birth mother, a woman who spent 30 years mourning a baby she was told she'd buried. The story's climax comes when she uncovers evidence that the doctor wasn't working alone. He was protected by judges, politicians, and a network of people who benefited from his crimes. Faced with the choice of going public and destroying countless families or staying silent and letting the truth die with the doctor, she chooses to fight. The story ends with her standing in front of a courthouse, surrounded by other victims, filing a class action lawsuit that will force the world to acknowledge what was done to them. Here are heartwarming and uplifting 2,000-word explanations for each of these beautiful reunion stories. 1. The reunion at Christmas. The story begins with our protagonist, a woman in her late 30s, going through the motions of another holiday season, decorating her apartment with the same ornaments she's had for years, attending obligatory office parties, and politely declining invitations from well-meaning friends who don't understand why Christmas always leaves her feeling hollow. This year feels particularly lonely after her adoptive parents passed away, within months of each other, leaving her truly alone for the first time. On a whim, she submits her DNA to a genealogy site just before the holiday rush, not expecting anything to come of it. The miracle happens on Christmas Eve when she receives an urgent email notification. An immediate familial match has been found. The match is a woman in her 60s who has been searching for a daughter given up under tragic circumstances decades earlier. The biological mother's profile contains a heartbreaking plea written years ago. If you're out there, I've looked for you every day since they took you from my arms in that hospital. Our protagonist's hands shake as she reads that the woman still lives in the same small town where she was born, just 2 hours away. What follows is a frantic series of phone calls and emails with the DNA service acting as intermediary, culminating in a tearful phone conversation on Christmas morning where the two women confirm the impossible truth. They've found each other after nearly 4 decades. The biological mother reveals she'd spent every Christmas hanging a special ornament with her lost daughter's name, keeping a stocking by the fireplace, and telling her other children about the sister they'd never met. Overcome with emotion, our protagonist makes the impulsive decision to drive through a snowstorm to meet her that very day. The reunion scene at the mother's modest but lovingly decorated home is everything you'd hope for and more. The door opens before she can knock, as if her mother somehow knew the exact moment she'd arrive. They fall into each other's arms on the front porch as snow falls around them, the mother whispering, "I knew you'd come home someday," between sobs. Inside, she's welcomed by siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins who've heard stories about her all their lives. The house is filled with photographs, including several of her as a baby she's never seen before, proof that she was loved and remembered all along. As they sit down to a Christmas dinner with an extra place setting that's waited 38 years to be filled, our protagonist realizes this is the first Christmas where she truly feels she belongs. 2. The adoptive sibling bond. Our protagonist grew up as an only child in a quiet, bookish household with older adoptive parents who doted on her but could never quite fill her longing for siblings. When she finally works up the courage to search for her birth family in her early 40s, she's stunned to discover not only were her biological parents young college students who went on to marry and have 3 more children, but that those siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, have been searching for her for years. The story beautifully unfolds through a series of emails and then video calls with her newfound siblings, each exchange peeling back layers of hesitation and building unbreakable bonds. Her sister, the youngest, tearfully shares how she'd written letters to her missing sister every birthday, storing them in a shoebox under her bed. The middle brother, now a father himself, admits he became a social worker specifically to help other adopted children find their families. The oldest brother shares their parents' heartbreaking story, how they were pressured to give up their firstborn, but spent their entire marriage regretting that decision, keeping a single photo of our protagonist as a newborn in their wedding album. The emotional crescendo comes when the siblings arrange to meet in person at the family's lakeside cabin, a place filled with memories they've all imagined sharing with her. Our protagonist arrives first, nervous and unsure, but when she hears car doors slam and excited voices calling, "She's here," followed by the thunder of feet running toward her, she's nearly knocked over by the force of her siblings' embrace. They spend the weekend making up for lost time. Her brothers teach her to fish like their father taught them. Her sister insists on doing each other's makeup like they missed doing as teenagers, and they stay up all night sharing childhood stories. Some so similar despite their different upbringings, it makes them gasp with recognition. The story closes with our protagonist realizing that while she came searching for answers about her past, she found something even more precious. The loud, messy, loving family she'd always dreamed of, who'd been waiting for her all along. As they take their first family photo together, everyone crowded onto the dock with their arms around each other. She understands that biology had connected them, but choice would make them a true family going forward. The forgotten, but not gone. This poignant story follows a woman in her 50s who finally locates her birth mother in a memory care facility, only to discover the woman is deep in the throes of advanced dementia. The nurses warn her not to expect much. Some days, her mother doesn't recognize her own name. Our protagonist prepares for the worst as she's led to the sunny common room where an elegant elderly woman sits staring out the window, her hands busy, folding and refolding a baby blanket. What happens next defies all medical expectations. When our protagonist kneels before the woman and says softly, "I think you might be my mother," the woman's cloudy eyes suddenly focus with startling clarity. She reaches out with trembling hands to cup our protagonist's face, whispering a name. No one has called her in decades, the name she was given at birth. For one miraculous hour, the dementia lifts like fog burning off in morning sun as her mother tells her about the difficult decision to give her up, shows her hidden photos kept in a locket all these years, and even sings a lullaby our protagonist has heard in her dreams since childhood. The nurses are stunned, calling it the most lucid they've ever seen the woman. But as quickly as the clarity came, it fades again, her mother slipping back into confusion before their eyes. Yet even in her confused state, she refuses to let go of our protagonist's hand, calling her "my baby," and insisting the nurses bring cookies for her special visitor. In the weeks that follow, our protagonist returns daily, learning to cherish the fleeting moments of connection between the fog of forgetfulness, the way her mother always lights up when she enters the room even if she can't say why, or how she instinctively hums that same lullaby while brushing our protagonist's hair. The story's most powerful moment comes when a nurse shares that before the dementia took hold, our protagonist's mother would sit by the window every afternoon, waiting for someone, though she could never say who. Our protagonist realizes with aching sweetness that in some deep place beyond memory, her mother never stopped waiting for her. Though she may never have the traditional reunion she imagined, she's found something equally profound, proof that the bond between mother and child exists beyond memory, beyond time, beyond even the cruel ravages of disease. The Village's Secret. When our protagonist travels to her remote Scandinavian birthplace to search for clues about her biological family, she expects at best some dusty records in a government office. What she finds instead is an entire village that remembers her, the winter baby born during a record snowstorm that isolated the community for weeks. From the moment she steps off the bus, elderly shopkeepers gasp at her resemblance to her mother. The midwife's daughter rushes over because she'd know those eyes anywhere, and the innkeeper refuses to let her pay for a room once he sees her name on the reservation. Over the course of her stay, the pieces of her origin story come together, like a beautiful mosaic. Her teenage mother was sent away to have the baby in secret, but the villagers had loved them both, leaving food on the porch, knitting tiny booties, and singing lullabies outside their window. When social services came to take the baby, our protagonist, the entire village protested, and some even offered to adopt her themselves rather than see her sent overseas. They've kept her memory alive all these years. The school teacher saved her mother's desk for a decade, hoping she'd return. The church still has the hastily arranged christening gown they sewed for her when they thought she might stay. And the Fui Bakery has continued making her mother's favorite pastry every Saturday, as if keeping the tradition might somehow bring them both back. The emotional climax comes when the villagers lead her to a small cottage at the edge of town. Her mother's childhood home, kept exactly as it was by neighbors taking turns to clean and air it out. Inside, our protagonist finds walls covered in photos of herself, clipped from the letters, and updates the adoption agency sent over the years before contact was lost. Her mother may have passed away, but in this village, she was never forgotten, just waiting to come home. As our protagonist sits at the kitchen table where her high chair once stood, surrounded by villagers who remember rocking her to sleep as an infant, she understands for the first time what it means to be truly welcomed, truly known, and truly loved. 45. The Legacy of Love. After learning her birth mother has passed away, our protagonist visits the woman's home expecting closure, but finding instead an extraordinary gift, a lifetime of love waiting for her. The mother's best friend, who tracked our protagonist down, leads her to a hope chest filled with decades of birthday cards never sent, childhood photos painstakingly collected from distant relatives, even a quilt with squares representing each year of her life the woman had stitched while imagining what her daughter might be like at that age. Most touching of all is a series of letters written at pivotal moments. One for her first day of school. I hope your teacher is kind and your lunchbox has your favorite snacks. One for her 16th birthday. However you're celebrating, know I'm imagining you in a pretty dress. Even one for her wedding day. Whoever they are, they're lucky to have you. Each letter is a window into the life her mother imagined for her, filled with ordinary hopes and extraordinary love. The final letter, written just before her mother's death, simply says, "However you found me, whatever path brought you here, welcome home, my darling. I loved you every second of every day." As our protagonist sorts through these treasures in her mother's cozy sitting room, preserved exactly as she left it, she's struck by how fully formed she existed in this woman's heart despite their separation. The neighbor shares stories of how her mother would bake 2 birthday cakes every year, one to share with friends and one to quietly set aside just in case. How she donated to children's charities in her daughter's name every Christmas. How she'd kept a journal detailing all the places she'd searched over the decades before illness made continuing impossible. The story ends with our protagonist wrapping herself in her mother's favorite shawl and opening the last gift, a simple locket containing their only photo together, taken in the hospital just after birth. As she presses it to her heart, she realizes that while death may have stolen their chance to reunite, it could never diminish the love that waited for her all these years. She leaves the house not with grief, but with the profound peace of knowing she was always someone's cherished daughter. Certainly, below are detailed explanations of each unconventional and twist-filled story outline, exploring their themes, emotional depth, and narrative potential in lengthy paragraphs. 46. The artificial insemination deception. Her father wasn't who she thought. Her mother used a donor and took the secret to her grave. This story delves into the profound emotional and psychological ramifications of discovering that one's biological identity is built on a lie. The protagonist, raised believing that the man she called Dad was her biological father, stumbles upon the truth after her mother's death, perhaps through old medical records, a hidden letter, or a DNA test. The revelation shatters her sense of self, forcing her to question everything she knew about her family. Was her father aware? Did her mother deceive him as well, or did they both agree to keep it hidden? The narrative could explore themes of betrayal, the ethics of secrecy in parenthood, and the existential crisis of not knowing half of one's genetic heritage. The protagonist might embark on a journey to uncover the identity of the sperm donor, leading her down a path of medical records, fertility clinics, and potential half-siblings. Along the way, she grapples with anger toward her mother for withholding such a fundamental truth, grief for the father she thought she had, and curiosity about the anonymous man who contributed to her existence. The story could take a dark turn. If the donor's identity reveals unsettling truths, perhaps he was a criminal, a man with a genetic disorder, or someone still alive who never wanted to be found. Alternatively, it could end on a bittersweet note, with the protagonist finding peace in accepting that biology doesn't define family, but the bonds of love do. This narrative resonates in an era where DNA testing has unraveled countless family secrets, making it a timely exploration of identity, privacy, and the moral complexities of assisted reproduction. The emotional core lies in the protagonist's struggle to reconcile the mother she loved with the woman who lied to her for decades. Was it an act of protection, shame, or simply a decision her mother never found the right time to confess? The Pause story forces readers to consider, how much truth do we owe our children? Biscordia. 47. The surrogate's regret. The woman who raised her wasn't her mother. She was the surrogate who grew too attached to give her up. This premise explores the blurred lines between genetic and emotional motherhood, raising ethical questions about surrogacy, attachment, and the lengths a person might go to keep a child they were never meant to raise. The protagonist, having lived a seemingly normal life, discovers that the woman she calls Mom was actually a surrogate hired by another couple, likely through legal documents, hidden letters, or a sudden confrontation with her biological parents. The twist could be that her mother fled with her shortly after birth, unable to bear parting with the baby she carried for 9 months. The emotional weight of this story lies in the protagonist's dual betrayal, by the woman who raised her, for stealing her from her true family, and by the biological parents, for potentially abandoning her or failing to search hard enough. The surrogate-turned-mother may have lived in constant fear of being discovered, fabricating an entire life to protect her secret. The protagonist must now navigate the fallout. Does she seek out her biological parents, potentially disrupting their lives? Does she forgive the woman who raised her, recognizing the depth of her love despite the deception? The narrative could take a legal thriller angle if the biological parents discover the truth and demand custody, or a psychological drama if the protagonist struggles with identity fragmentation. Themes of nature versus nurture, the definition of motherhood, and the moral ambiguity of surrogacy agreements come into play. The surrogate's regret could stem from genuine maternal instinct or deeper psychological issues, such as infertility grief or manipulation by the biological parents. The story's power lies in its gray morality. Neither the surrogate nor the biological parents are entirely villains or heroes, leaving the protagonist in a heartbreaking limbo of loyalty and loss. 48. The Witness's Daughter. Her mother gave her up to protect her from a criminal trial, living in fear ever since. This outline presents a gripping tale of sacrifice, survival, and the long shadows of crime. The protagonist, raised by adoptive parents or in foster care, learns that her birth mother was a key witness in a high-profile criminal case, perhaps against a drug cartel, a powerful politician, or a mafia boss. Fearing retaliation, her mother made the agonizing choice to place her in hiding, possibly under a new identity, while she testified and entered witness protection herself. The story could begin with the protagonist receiving a mysterious letter or a visit from a stranger claiming to know her real mother, unraveling years of buried trauma. The emotional core lies in the protagonist's conflicted feelings toward her mother. Was abandoning her an act of love or cowardice? The mother may have spent years watching from afar, unable to make contact for fear of leading danger to her child. The narrative could shift between past and present, revealing the mother's terror as she testified, the lengths she went to ensure her daughter's safety, and the guilt she carried every day. Meanwhile, the protagonist must decide whether to seek out the truth, knowing it might awaken old threats. The story could evolve into a thriller if the criminals discover her existence, forcing her into a cat-and-mouse game to survive. Alternatively, it could be a poignant drama about reconciliation, as mother and daughter reunite after decades of separation, only to find they are strangers bound by blood and sacrifice. Themes of justice, trauma, and the cost of protection are central. How far would a parent go to shield their child, even if it means losing them forever? D9. The Celebrity Love Child. Her father was a famous actor who paid to keep her existence a secret. This premise taps into the allure and darkness of fame, exploring the consequences of a celebrity's hidden past. The protagonist, raised by a single mother or adoptive parents, discovers that her biological father is a beloved Hollywood star who orchestrated her erasure to protect his career. The reveal might come through a deathbed confession, a leaked tabloid story, or a DNA match with a half-sibling. The emotional turmoil is immediate. Why did he reject her? Was her mother complicit in the cover-up, or was she coerced into silence? The narrative could explore the protagonist's attempt to confront her father, only to face legal threats, paid-off journalists, and a carefully constructed facade. The celebrity may have other secret children, a history of exploitation, or a paranoid fear of scandal. The story could take a dark turn if the protagonist becomes a media spectacle, hounded by paparazzi, while grappling with the realization that her existence was someone else's shame. Alternatively, the father might be a tragic figure, a man trapped by his public image, who longed to know his daughter but was bound by contracts and manipulative handlers. The protagonist must then decide whether to expose him, demand acknowledgement, or walk away from the toxic world of fame. Themes of identity, privilege, and the dehumanizing nature of celebrity culture drive the story, asking, what is the cost of living in the shadows of someone else's spotlight? 50. The Sister Who Raised Her. The woman she thought was her older sister was actually her mother, hiding the truth to avoid shame. This heartbreaking twist reveals a story of teenage pregnancy, societal pressure, and the lengths families go to maintain appearances. The protagonist, raised believing her mother was her sister, discovers the truth through an accidental slip, an old photograph, or a relative's drunken confession. The sister was likely a young mother, perhaps a teenager, whose parents forced her to pretend the baby was their child to avoid scandal. The emotional devastation is twofold. The protagonist loses the sister she adored and gains a mother she never knew, while the mother has lived a lie, unable to claim her child openly. The narrative could explore the mother's pain. Did she resent her parents for forcing this charade? Did she yearn to tell the truth but fear rejection? The protagonist must reconcile her anger with empathy, understanding the oppressive circumstances that led to the deception. The story could delve into themes of generational shame, the stifling expectations placed on women, and the psychological toll of living a double life. A poignant resolution might see the protagonist and her mother rebuilding their relationship on honest terms, finally free from the weight of secrecy.